Hi, Anindita.
Hi, Namrata.
Hi.
So is this is a weekly cohort? It's the same cohort through the month?
No, so actually this is the first draft club.
Okay.
It was created on the lines of NaNoWriMo, but we meet like 4 to 5 times a year.
Okay.
It's that 1 month that we target to complete our first draft, and it could be any genre or anything. It could be the second or the third draft also. But the idea is to make writing a habit. And so on weekends, we meet on Zoom, and we invite literary guests like authors, publishers, literary agents to talk to them, to share their experiences, to give them tips.
Right. Now, I was just asking if it's the same group or does the group keep changing? So annually the cohort is different?
Yeah, every month actually there are different people, but yeah, some of them have become like, permanent.
Regulars.
Yeah.
Right.
So they are there because it's a fun interaction. It's a good writing community to have. We have like some 40, 50 people every time. So the WhatsApp group is active. We share a lot of writing prompts there. So it keeps them engaged that way.
And do you end up doing a first draft with every group, or you're just you're the captain steering the ship?
I did it this is actually the seventh one right now. So we have been doing it like 2020. I did the first and the fourth one. So it depends. If I am actually in that mood and if that month looks really good for me in terms of everything, I try to do participate. It's definitely good.
And so are you privy Trifle on Twitter? You are.
Yeah.
Good to meet the person behind the handle.
That's the name of my blog actually.
Okay.
So that's how I started that Twitter account.
And where are the members mostly from? Is there a concentration from one city or?
No, they are all across the globe because it's virtual. So, we have participants who are living outside India as well.
Okay.
Should we wait for 5 more minutes? Then we can start maybe.
So Namrata, does it always also work as a book club in the sense the people, do you all read the same books in order to discuss them?
We do have a book club, but that is separate from this.
Okay. Okay.
Some of the members are common because as it's the Himalayan writing retreat community, so many of them have done workshops. Many of them are there in the book club as reviewers who review books. So they have attended our workshops and they are alums now, or they've just been participants with FDC. Like Shalini has been a participant in FDC and she's completed her first draft. And after that, she actually got published this month. I think February was when your book released, Shalini?
Yeah. Yes, February was when it was released.
Congratulations, Shalini.
Thank you so much.
I feel for authors publishing during COVID, it's a very special and different experience. So, yeah.
It was. And now I'm hoping to get going with the draft of the second book. So.
No, I was asking Namrata also because there's a Q&A. So I was wondering if the members would have read the Illuminated, or it's more general questions.
It'll be more general. It'll be more general about writing and about publishing. They could have read your book because it's been actually there on the internet. It's been there on the bestsellers list and it's been talked about so much on the social media and all. So some of them might have read it. We have already shared the details about your profile, about the book and about everything with them.
But the questions will be more about the writing process.
Yeah, writing process. Yeah. So even my questions that I have right now are more related about the writing and the publishing journey about the book. Though the book is in focus, but yeah, it is definitely more on those.
Sure, sounds good.
So I think it's 5:05 and we should start now. First of all, I would like to just convey that Chetan cannot attend this session. He'll not be attending this session. We are having a Himalayan International Writers Retreat at the retreat in Satkol today. And it'll also be there till next week. We are having it for like 10 days. And so there are a lot of American writers who have arrived with an entire group. So he'll not be here. So I'll be in charge of this session. So good evening, everyone. Welcome to this session. Today we have best-selling author Anindita Ghose with us. Anindita is a journalist and author based in Mumbai. Her debut novel, The Illuminated, is out in the Indian subcontinent from HarperCollins and has been a bestseller. It has been featured on best fiction lists by the Telegraph, the Times of India, and the GQ, among others. It was also featured on the HWR-Nielson Top 50 Fiction Books Bestsellers list. The Independent has picked Anindita as one of their 9 best-coming authors from India. She's been a culture journalist for 15 years and was most recently the editor of Mint Launch, the award-winning Saturday magazine that supplements the Indian business daily Mint. As the features director of Vogue India, she wrote and commissioned stories on art, books, culture, design, and travel. She has a master's degree in linguistics and semiotics from the University of Mumbai and a master's in arts and culture journalism from Columbia University. In 2019, she was a Hawthornden Writing Fellow. She's currently working as an independent editorial consultant and writing her second novel. So welcome to this session, Anindita, and thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm glad to be here, Namrata.
So our first question for you today is, you made your debut with the Illuminated after having worked as a journalist for close to 15 years. So can you let us know a bit about your journey of becoming a writer? How did it happen?
Right. So I've been a journalist for 15 years, as you mentioned. I started writing Illuminated. I actually remember the specific month that I started writing it. It was August 2015. Until then, I think novelists aren't born overnight. People might publish their first novel at the age of 50 or 40, but I think those who go on to become novelists, they've been writing in some capacity all their life. Novelists are those possibly annoying children in the family who make, summer storybooks, who force their grandparents and their friends to read poetry. So, in that case, in that kind of respect, I've been writing all my life. I wrote poetry when I was 8, and it wasn't serious. And I do want to focus on this aspect, especially for this group, because it's a first draft club, that becoming a writer in India or kind of sustaining a career as a full-time fiction writer, it really does not seem sustainable. So, if you come from a family where there aren't artists, if you come from a family where you've seen, for instance, your parents have regular day jobs, you do not graduate college and tell yourself that I'm going to write a novel. It simply does not happen. You kind of go out and try to translate your love for writing and your aptitude for writing into an adjacent field where that aptitude will translate into a job that will help you, pay rent and become an adult and do your taxes and all of that. So I knew I always wanted to write in some way or the other. Since at 21, being a novelist was a very far-fetched dream. I decided to study journalism because I felt that was a way in which I could write in some way. And as a journalist, I was first with Mint and then with Vogue. Journalists get approached by publishers a lot for nonfiction books. So I had, in around 2015, when I'd already been a journalist, for say 5 or 6 years, I had a lot of publishers asking me to do these nonfiction books. So somebody said, will you do history of yoga, or will you do, an anthology of Indian artists? And I should have been happy. It sounded exciting for someone in their early 30s to be asked by a big publisher to do these books. And I considered them, but I was really dragging my feet on it around this time because it didn't seem exciting. It just felt like it would be an extension of my job as a journalist, which I worked very hard at, and, almost 10 to 12 hours a day. And I did that Monday to say Saturday, and writing a nonfiction book would just be that. So it was in this, but I didn't have the courage, or, I didn't think I could just write a novel. Like, who are you, just coming up and saying, I want to write a novel. I didn't have that permission. I didn't know novelists. Apart from the famous novelists that I had interviewed, I didn't have, novelist friends or novelists in my family. So around this time, I was at the Mountain Echoes Literary Retreat, and I heard a writer speak, which is why I personally really, I'm a big fan of reading writer interviews and attending lit fests or, virtual sessions to hear writers speak, because I feel all my inspiration or everything I've learned, even a lot craft-wise from writing, has come from hearing or reading other writers speak about writing. So at the Mountain Echoes Lit Fest, there was a session about, where does fiction come from? And there were a bunch of writers at the festival. I was there as a moderator. I was interviewing, I think, Arundhati Subramaniam that year. But this was a session where Janice Pariat was speaking, and somebody asked her, when you're writing a novel, do you need to know the end? And she spoke really eloquently, as she always does. And she said that sometimes when you're writing fiction, you know the destination, but you have to chart out the roads to get there. And sometimes you don't know the destination. You can only see clearly what your headlights reveal. And it's okay if you don't know where you're going. And I feel hearing that really, kind of sparked something in me. And I realized that unlike nonfiction or unlike journalism, when you're embarking on fiction, you don't really necessarily need to have a fully plotted, fully clear idea of what the book is going to be. It's about giving your idea and yourself some time and trusting in it and going with it and letting it marinate. And I think it was really there, 2015 August Mountain Echoes Festival in Bhutan, where I realized I'm going to write a novel. And specifically on the cab ride, from the festival to the airport, I thought I had an image. And I feel since then, most stories begin with an image or a feeling, rather than say characters or structure or plot or dialogue and narrative. Those can all come in later. So I had a very strong image of this woman who has suffered a great loss, but all she wants is a cup of tea. And that cup of tea is, symbolic of just everything she needs for herself. The world expects her to grieve in a certain way, and it expects her to want other things, but all she wants is a cup of tea. So really the entire novel, The Illuminated, really just began with this image and this feeling, and that was the start of the novel.
Wow, that's actually very inspiring to hear. So we would like to know more about your publishing journey. How did you pitch your book? How did you find your literary agent? Did you have any rejections? Because I remember you mentioned somewhere it took you 5 years to write this book.
Right.
We're working on this.
Yeah, so I think the amount of time it takes to write the book is a separate matter. And then the amount of time it takes you to actually get published. I mean, these are completely two different questions and answers, right? As in, someone can write their book in 2 years and it can sit in a drawer or on your desktop in a file for 10 years. So these are separate questions, but I'll answer both. It did take me 5 years plus 1 year of editing, but and I was feeling quite frustrated, 4 years in. That's when I went to my first writing retreat. But to give myself credit, I did have full-time jobs that entire time. I only quit full-time journalism after the novel was announced in October 2020. The book was already done by then, and it was out next year. I was editing after I quit my job, just working with kind of publisher edits, which is a whole different process, and we'll talk about that. But it took me 5 years, because I had pretty demanding jobs. I was, features editor at Vogue, and then the editor of a Saturday paper. We worked 12 hours a day. I certainly did. So the only time I had really to write was second half of Saturday and all of Sunday. And one does need to do normal things, in that time as well, things you've not been able to do the rest of the week. So I had limited time, or late nights after all work emails and everything was done. So maybe 12 to 2. So I think that could explain why it took 5 hours, but 5 years, not 5 hours. But I've been speaking to most of the debut writers I know around here, again, because writing in India is not a sustainable vocation. People don't really have the confidence to quit their jobs or leap out of their safety nets when they're working on their first book, at least. I quit my job after I knew I'm going to be published by a leading publisher, and I found an international agent. So that's how I thought, okay, this could be a career. And that's when I quit, right? So actually 5 years is not so long for literary fiction. Most of my writer friends that I've made along the way, say Shohangi Swaroop, who wrote this brilliant, beautiful book called Latitudes of Longing. I think she worked on it for 7 or 8 years, and she didn't even have full-time jobs in that period. I think Avni Doshi wrote her book for 7 years. Amrita Mahale wrote her book for 4 to 5 years. So these are debut writers I'm speaking about. So I don't think the time is unusual. As far as as to how I found an agent and a publisher, being a journalist who wrote on art and books, I did know publishers. I didn't know the editors, and they are the ones you need to know because they are the ones who buy your book. Like the CEO of HarperCollins who reaches out to you for press, or the PR person at Penguin who reaches out to you for press stories. They are the people I knew, but they are not the ones who pitch for a book. A pitch happens when you, or in most cases, an agent sends the book specifically to editors who might be suited for your book, and they buy your book. I didn't know editors because they are not public facing. They are not the ones who, reach out to journalists or really are involved in the book publicity process. So I didn't know them. I did know publishers, but I think that sometimes when you know people, it also works against you. Because I knew people, I was even more conscious that I needed an agent. Otherwise, and I think literary agents have become more organized and more popular as a concept in India, say in the last 3 or 4 years. Yeah. Otherwise, before that, you could just write to a publishing house and say, hi, here's my book, read it. And I still could have done that, but I didn't think my book would be taken seriously and, that it would get the right attention that it deserves if I went through an informal route. And, I feel as a woman in a leadership role or whatever, as a woman with some success, you also suffer from impostor syndrome. So I just thought, what if I send it and they just publish me because I'm a journalist, because they think if they publish the Mint Lounge editor, they'll get coverage in Mint Lounge. I was very worried about these things. So I wanted to go via the proper channels of getting an agent. And by then, because so many people around me were getting international agents and signing on, I didn't think it would be that hard, but it was. So I started reaching out to agents before the book was fully done. I started I think when I was just halfway done, I wrote to David Godwin and he read 2 chapters and said, I think then he said the first 2 chapters, and they were very different from what they are now. And he wasn't sure. He said that, he said I needed a woman agent, which I found really strange. My book is about women and I'm a woman, but why, it makes no sense. Why is he saying I need a female agent? I thought it was very sexist. I was quite upset actually. And then I wrote to Wiley. I wrote to a couple of, say the best 4 or 5 international agents, and with the first 2 chapters. So at that point, I think Wiley replied and said they were very interested and that I should write to them once I finish the full book. And this was, I think, in 2019 when I wrote to them, and I was quite far from finishing the book. But this was pre-pandemic. So I had written to them and then COVID happened. So by the time I wrote to them with my finished manuscript, they said, the whole publishing industry has such a backlog because of COVID, because the big books they had planned had not released, and the publishers had made so many losses that they could not afford to publish something that could either be really big or be really a flop. They could not take those chances, and publishing a debut author is a chance. Publishing even a mediocre or a medium selling author's 3rd or 4th book is at least a bankable bet for a publisher, because they have an idea that these many copies sell of so-and-so author's book. This is how much we'll invest. This is how many copies we'll print. So COVID for me as a COVID time debut author reaching out to international agents was a really bad timing, because they said, we loved your book, but now we don't think we can sell this. So Wiley said no. And I didn't write to Godwin again because he had said not so nice things for the first 2 chapters. So I was waiting. And at that point, I think publishing a book and the timing of it is also so much to do about where you are in your personal life and what you need. By then, I was really frustrated with Indian journalism. I wanted to quit my job, but I couldn't till I knew that something was happening with this book. So I actually didn't wait any longer for an international agent at that point. I decided to go ahead with Himali Sodhi, who was just setting up a suitable agency in India. I was her first author, and now she's doing really well. She has a bunch of other authors. And so I told her, let's just do this step by step. You become my agent for South Asia and let's sell the book here. And she had already, like in an informal capacity, read my book even before she knew she was going to be an agent. So she's just somebody I met at a festival. Again, I didn't know her before. Festivals are good places to meet people. And at that time, actually, I'd met her and I just told her that who should I write to? What international agent should I write to? And she had given me these names, Wiley, etc. That time, she had just quit her job at Penguin, but she didn't know she was setting up an agency. So I had told her, instead of just making a blank or blind introduction, why don't you read some of my book before you make the introduction? So that's how she had read it and she had really liked it. And she had said, I'll make any introductions you want. So I called her and she said, I am thinking of setting up the agency. So let's go ahead. So we went ahead and it was great when it's your first project. It was my first book and her first book for the agency. So I think she put a lot of energy into it. She truly loved the book, which I think is really important, that your agent and your editor are really passionate about your book and not just taking it up as another, just another project out of 50. And I think that showed. And I think so many things go into making a first book a bestseller or on, critically acclaimed or just being read by the right people or go on to be a film and all of that. There are so many factors. And I think a good agent is definitely one of them. And who she places it with is also one of them. So that's another thing. If I didn't have an agent, I wouldn't really know which editors to send the book to in which publishing house. Because even all of you today as writers, you can actually just Google who are the editors at Penguin and, there'll be 5 and you can mail it to one of them. But a very few of us know enough about the innards of publishing to know who to send it to. So she sent it, I think, to the right person at HarperCollins who clicked with it, Udayan Mitra, who is their head editor. He's the publisher, actually. So, and she'd always thought he'd be a good fit, but we had to play fair and hear out everyone. So she sent it to all the top editors, publishers. She sent it to, I think, 10, out of which 2 were almost defunct because of COVID. 2 had no budget. So it was effectively 8. And all 8 of them replied with a pitch, even with the money and all of it. And out of those 8, so it was an auction for my first book, which is a really good thing. And it only happened because I had a great agent in Himali. So out of those 8, 2 of them had a very low advance and they weren't doing well financially, again, COVID. And they were very clear that, listen, we love the book, but we cannot give more money than this. So they were removed from the equation. Then we had 6 and she reached out to them again for a second round of bidding. So then those 6 publishers bid again and I finalized on 3, which was HarperCollins, Penguin and Bestland. Which, apart from being the highest advances, had also, exhibited a great interest and understanding and positioning for the book. And then for those 3, Himali, my agent, suggested that I have one-on-one conversations with the editors because they are the ones I'll be working with. And I did. And because of a confluence of factors, we went with Udayan Mitra at HarperCollins. Once HarperCollins signed me on, it was still almost a year until the book was published because it does take that long to work on, a couple of rounds of edits with your editor. Then there's a copy edit, then there's a final proof, and then there's to and fro on the cover and all of that. So, it was almost a full year of all of that. So I think in all, I worked on the book for 6 years. Yeah. Very long answer to your question, Amrita. I'm going to keep my answer short now.
Not at all, not at all. The reason why I mentioned 5 years is because, these days we have a lot of options which have come in the form of self-publishing. We can go on Kindle, we click a button and a book is live globally. It's not even just limited to India. So we have come across a lot of writers who are like, I just have a book and I want it out.
Yeah.
So for them to understand that they have cues.
Yeah, but Namrata, so for me, the 5 years were not like I had finished the book and I was
Yeah.
waiting for a publisher. I was
That's
actually
what I
writing.
wanted to talk you to
I was
talk about.
writing for 5 years, then editing for a year. And my advice, the one that I received that I would share with everyone is you don't need to really wait to finish the absolute full book before you start reaching out for agents. Because, you know, for an agent, just even reading your first 30 chapters and 30 pages and having a clear synopsis of the book, like by the time you reach out to the agent, you at least need to know what the book is, even if you've not written it, is enough. Because now a lot of agents and even some editors like to get involved in a book before it's finished. You know, they kind of want to understand and shape the book with you, even when it's fiction. Right. So you don't, when you're near the end, you can start the process because it takes a long time. Like an international agent will take, 8 weeks to get back to you. So if you're writing to them one after the other and you're writing to 5, that's already, 10 months. So you can start the process before you fully finished. By the time they show interest, so you should factor that in the 10 months that you finalize the agent, by the time they show interest, you should have the full book. So then you can send it to them. But do start your research into who you want to write to and, all of that way in advance. So I kind of started it, a year before I finished, which is why by the time I finished, I kind of had an agent, right? So, yeah.
Sure. That sounds like a very great advice. Anindita, I had actually read and reviewed your book. So I remember one of your interviews with the Asiatic Literary Society where you spoke about your inspiration for the 2 primary characters of your novel, Shashi and Tara, and how you chalked out their different personalities inspired by 2 of your friends who had similar interests on reading Sanskrit literature and all. So, but I love the characters that you have, the 4 or 5 females, very strong characters in your novel, and each one of them is very different and yet has a thread, common thread, which is going through them, which brings out their strength as a woman. So are there any tips that you would like to share on writing, creating memorable characters which are complex, which are not, are more 3D rather than just being 1D characters which leave an impression on the reader?
Right. So Namrata, I know, of course, you read a lot of books, so it might be easy to sometimes confuse some author and some book, but I really have not said anywhere that the characters were based on women. I know they're not based on friends. Okay. They're not based on anyone. So it's a very hard question to answer because I think authors keep getting asked if they are biographical. They're not. Tips in the sense, I think most interesting fictional characters are composite characters of people we've seen or imagined. So, you can kind of mix up or collage traits and biographical details of different people. But I also feel as an author, and, I'm sure some of you are already writing fiction. Namrata, you've already written stories that after some point, you can start off thinking, sitting in your chair and thinking that, okay, I want to write a story about a girl who grew up in Dehradun and she studied medicine. Suppose, that's your starting point because there is some active thinking. But when you're writing fiction and if you're really immersed in it, at some point in the process, the characters become real people. They have free will. They tell you when something isn't fitting with their character, or if you've made them wear something or say something that doesn't agree with them, they do become real. They have lives of their own and voice of their own. So I think there's an initial process of just charting out some broad details, but then it does take off. One interesting thing, some writer friends of mine, for instance, use tarot also, or they use zodiac signs to figure out a person's character. So, if they want to say that this person is a fire sign and, they tend to react in certain ways, or if you have a deep understanding of psychology, you can actually categorize them as a psychological a species so that it helps you remain authentic to how they would act or behave in different situations. Interestingly, my editor in one of my edits at some point, he had asked me about sun signs of my characters to check if I had thought enough about their psychological and emotive responsiveness. So that might be a good tool to bring up sometime later. I would first suggest psychological categorizing, and second, zodiac sign seems, kind of more loose. But I think as writers, you only need to think of the very early broad detailing, because after that, they kind of build force of their own.
Sure. That's been very helpful. Once your book was picked by the publisher, so how involved were you in the process till it was published? Like you just spoke about how, the number of edits that you went through with your editor and the cover and all. So if you could throw some light on how involved as a writer an author does get an option of, giving their choices, or are they able to tell about the cover, the feedback about the cover, or even the period when they want the book to be decided? Because this is one of the questions that we come across in a lot of our sessions, where people feel that, once a publisher picks up, the book will be out in the next 3 months or 6 months. But we had Himali in one of the sessions, and even she said that, we decide the launch of the book, and there is actually a long process. We decide based on the genre of the book, when it should be released, and what is the ideal time that we think it should have and all. So what was your level of involvement in this?
Oh, I was very involved, but that might not be normal. I'm also, I was used to being an editor. I'm also quite controlling and obsessive. So I might have been more involved than my publishers would have wanted me to be. But how is it possible not to be controlling, right? It's your book. But in contracts that you sign, like I just signed another contract now, by contract, your publisher does have the final say in, say, cover and book title. They do, because I think if they leave it open, some authors could not be very cooperative, and maybe, they've decided on a launch date, but they've not locked in on a cover. So contractually, it's the publisher's last choice. But I think any publisher would, who signed you on would, of course, want to keep you happy, and would want to respect your choice and involvement. So after I sent it in, the way it works is, I guess your main editor, many publishing houses might assign 2 editors to your book, but there's still always a lead editor who takes all the calls. And the lead editor then might also involve a junior editor who gives, comments. In my case, the lead editor was Udayan. But what was very interesting, especially for someone coming from journalism, where our edits and directions seem to be more prescriptive. If I edit a story, I say change the headline, add more fact here, shorten this. I need that done. It's not a suggestion, it's an edit. But in fiction, I realized that everything is a suggestion. No good editor is, unless your book is really terrible, but then why would they sign you on if they don't like it, right? An editor who likes your book and respects you as a writer will actually never tell you that, Namrata, you have to delete this, or Namrata, like this absolutely doesn't work. It's not that direct. In fiction, I think the edits are more loose. It's more like suggestions to make you think about it. So they might say, okay, Namrata, can you rethink this part? Or this is abrupt for me, or this does not make sense to me after the last. But the final choice is yours as the writer. No editor is going to come in and cancel 5 pages from your book. They will make suggestions, and you will mutually decide how to work, right? This is an ideal scenario. Now, if you're someone who is very bad with deadlines and you haven't responded to your editor and you've disappeared on some internet-less, hike in Leh Ladakh, and your book is due to the press in 2 weeks, then this does not apply. Then your editor might just say, to hell with it, I'm going ahead. But in an ideal situation, it was, for me, I can speak for myself, it was quite a mutual process where he made a suggestion, I said yes, said no, so, and there were several rounds of it, like that we went through the full book at least 3 times, right? So the first round was just really broad structural edits, like move this here, move that there. The second round was more at a paragraph level, and third round was more at a line level. For me, I was actually making changes. I do not advise this, but I was making changes right till the final PDF that they sent me that's going to go into press tomorrow. I was still making some changes in that. But I think many people do, because, it's your baby and you want to make it the best, right? So if you, even in that last day, you see that one comma here could have been better, you're going to do it. After it goes to the press, it's going to take some time getting kind of, copy like set and all of that, typeset and printed. So I think that's when the conversation about the cover really picks up. And again, there might be some writers who are not that interested in covers or in design. They might just be given 5 options and picked. But as a female writer, as a debut author, my book is a feminist book. I was quite clear about some messaging. I didn't want the cover to, be, have flowers and kind of women and some jewelry, that kind of pretty landscape that women's books typically do, because you also have to appreciate that publishing is also an industry. There are certain marketing and, tropes that are used here. So thrillers have a certain kind of cover, books by women have a certain kind of cover, books by the serious award-winning male authors have a different kind of cover. And I said, I want a cover of a serious award-winning male author. Why should my cover have, some flower and some golden and some woman with, the first option that was given to me was a woman with nail polish with her feet on the grass. And I said, this absolutely not, this is not going to be my cover. So the cover took some time to and fro. There were various iterations. I got another close friend of mine who is an art director involved. She gave some suggestions. And again, I feel we mutually agreed upon a cover that worked.
I just want to say the cover is brilliant, actually. I am holding this. I love this because the irony is you don't realize what it says till you actually reach the last page, and then suddenly you are like, oh, there are so many hidden messages. I read it twice to get the depth of the messages which is there between the lines. The cover is actually very brilliantly done.
Yeah, so even the cover, right, just like the author, you see the final PDF version and you might have changes. Even the designer might have improvements once they make a dummy. So for instance, they made a dummy of this cover I have the book here with like blank pages. They made a book that would be of the same page length as the actual book, and they made a dummy cover, and it's very expensive to produce that dummy. So they didn't even send one to my editor. Directly from the designer, one copy was sent to me in Bombay and to the art director of HarperCollins, the senior most person who was designing the cover, Bonita Ghose, who lives in Goa. And I was so impressed that even at that stage, like she saw the cover and she made some changes that are vital. So, Namrata, the half moons that you see on the cover that are silver, and on the spine, there is a gold moon.
Yeah.
It was the gold moon was a silver moon, and the half stuff on the cover was it was not foil, it was gray. So she saw the actual finished product and said, make the silver into gold on the spine and make these half moons silver, So I feel for a book, at every stage, every person involved is making improvements in whatever way they can. And you have to trust each other and trust the team that you work with to go ahead with that, right? So you have to work with a good team, basically, and work with people who really respect you and appreciate the book so that they put in that effort.
Sure. This is actually a question from me rather than from HWR. So I have always been fascinated by stories about editors and authors as a team working to create bestsellers or to create history. Like we have Chetan Bhagat, who was picked up by an editor, God of Small Things, which the editor believed that it deserved to win the award, but the author was not confident. Your book actually went on to win so many awards. So I wanted to ask you, did at any stage when you were writing, did you know that this could actually be an award-winning novel, or your editor or your late agent, anyone ever felt while they were working on that book that this had the potential and it changed the whole marketing strategy or the way they approach the book or something?
Yeah. So again, Namrata, to put it in very crude terms, I know that people expect writers to speak in very, highfalutin ways and say that awards don't matter and positioning doesn't matter. I just write to write, but that's not true, right? You write to be read. And honestly, awards also are just a way to be. For me, the way I view being on any list, being on lists, whatever, is to get more people to read your book. Because apart from JCB, honestly, none of the other awards even offer very high monetary reward. And that's quite fraudulent. That's not fair, because writers anyway don't make much money, in India, especially for your first book. So if you are getting a sponsor and running an award and, getting content for your magazine or paper, at least the writers should be compensated well. Like there's one award that was, I think, paying 30,000 to 3 winners, like 30,000 to be shared between 3 winners. It's really not even worth the paperwork you have to do for it. It's really, it's insulting almost, right? So at least you have to at least pay people well. So I'm saying there is really no monetary value much apart from JCB, but the way that awards help is that every list you're on, or any award you're even longlisted for, it helps you get 10, 20, 100 more readers, right? Because they read some article about it, and that's good. So I am not, I'm not coming from this Miss India kind of background where I'm like, oh my God, like this book did well, I'm so surprised. I wasn't surprised, because if I thought I wasn't writing something good, I would not leave a perfectly good career that I've invested 15 years in, where I've spent money. I took a loan to go to Columbia. My family has helped me. So I wouldn't really give this career up. I was the editor of a national daily. There are very few of those jobs anymore. So I wouldn't have given all that up if I didn't think that I was on to something that would create some kind of a mark. But maybe the thing is that sometimes when you expect too much, you're also disappointed. So in my case, Namrata, I feel that the hype by my agent and my publisher to me was so much. They said, Arey, your book is going to be out. You're going to win all the awards. I didn't win all the awards. You're going to win JCB. You're going to win Tata. You're going to win Hindu. You're going to win everything. Then you're going to be published in the UK. Then you'll be in the Booker long list. So then you'll be a movie next year. So they had already hyped it up so much that even though really good things happened, it was not their hype. But that hype and excitement is important, because ultimately it is one person believing in you. Like it is your agent first believing in you, who goes out and pitches your book in a big way to publishers. Then it's those publishers believing in you. So since you mentioned God of Small Things, the person who made God of Small Things a big book was not even the editor as much as the agent, and I have the same agent. So I went on to get an international agent in addition to Himalayan, which is David Godwin. And David Godwin was the one who read Arundhati Roy's manuscript and sold it abroad and said, this is the next big thing, right? So you need that one person to first champion your book, because you can't be the only champion of your book. And at a point when you put so much of yourself into the book, no matter how confident you are, no matter how assertive you are, it's very hard to sell your book. It's very hard to keep talking up your book. Someone else has to do it, because you're the creator, you are not a marketing person. So you need, and also as a first-time writer, there are always periods of thinking I've done a great job, and also periods of deep vulnerability and thinking, who do I think I am? What have I done? This is rubbish. It's really a very high and a very low. So in my case, though, my agent really read it, and she has 25 years of experience in publishing. She was new as an agent, but she has experience in publishing. She was with Penguin for 25 years. And she said it's the best Indian book she's read like in many years. And when we finally went to Udayan, who again has, I think, 30 years of experience in Indian publishing. He's published Anindita Ghose and, Ruskin Bond and really the greats. He was so very supportive and complimentary that they truly made me believe that I was onto something big. So, it's not just enough for, say, your husband or your parents or your best friend to say the book is good, right? You need that professional validation. So in my case, again, it's the positioning of it. HarperCollins, when they bought it, and also one of the reasons we decided to go with HarperCollins rather than the other two, not just money, is also they said that we are going to position it not just as a debut book. It's not a debut book of the year for us. For them, it was one of their literary fiction highlights of the year. That's what they put in the press release. And these things really matter. The way your publisher positions your book in their list, right? Because every publisher will have a spring list and a fall list.
Yeah.
In their list, they might pay you money, but if in the time that your book is also out, they have 3 other big titles. Then all their energy in terms of publicity, marketing, focus, time spent by the editor, book designer, all of that will go into those 3 titles.
Right.
So maybe in a way, while COVID worked against me, it also worked for me. They didn't have too many other really big books in my time. I think there was Chitra Divakaruni's Last Queen and one more book. And so they said it was going to be their literary highlight of the year. And when the publisher already positions it that way, you already have one step ahead. You're already one step ahead in the game. Then, of course, it's up to the readers and the reviewers to actually like the book. But a lot of work is done even before somebody reads the book. It's in the positioning of the book. So those were important choices to make. And I wouldn't have been able to make them without a literary agent who was guiding me in the right direction.
Thank you. This actually has been a very insightful answer. I think we'll move to questions. We have some questions. So this was a very clear response, Anindita. Thank you. But how do you identify a literary agent and how do you decide a good fit? Sai wants to know.
Right. It's a very important question, Sai. You know, at first, when I wrote to all the international agents, right, I just looked at the top agents and I'm like, let's try to the really big ones. They didn't reply. So that's not a good way to go. The next strategy I took, which I think Avni told me, the author of Girl in White Cotton, is that look for the agents of the books that you like. So for instance, I liked her book. So I saw who her agent was. It was Qantas, because then I'm also seeing that if I like this book and this agent has picked up this book and I feel that in some ways this book is in the same category as me, then I have some chance of being picked up by this agent, right? Because you're spending a lot of time waiting for agents. Many agents don't like you to write to other agents at the same time. So they say that if you send it to us, you have to wait for 8 weeks or 12 weeks. So if I write to a wrong agent, I'm killing 12 weeks of my year. It's not a good idea. So I looked up the agents of good debut novels, also debut novelists from South Asia that had done well abroad. So I wrote to the agent of Megha Majumdar, Burning. I wrote to Avni's agent. I wrote to Wiley, basically represents Sally Rooney. So they believe in young writers, but they also represent like Rushdie and Atish Tasir and a lot of Indian writers. So that's why I wrote to them. Because if I write to even within an agency, just like how we spoke about how within an publishing house, there are editors who like different kinds of books. Even within an agency, the agency might be the right fit for you. But in that agency, if you write to the wrong agent, then it's a lost cause. So if you do your research properly, look up, suppose you go to the Wiley website, each agent will have a profile mentioned and that profile will say what kind of books they like. So you have to do that research. No one else can do that research for you. Because if Namrata does this research and Himalayan Writers Forum puts up this article, then of 5 agents, then all of you are going to write to those same 5 agents and they'll be overwhelmed with sudden applications from Indian writers and then no one will make it. So this is really personal research. You look up the profile of the agents. All agents have pretty detailed bios where they'll say, we like first writers, we like historical fiction, we don't look at thrillers. And so write to that agent specifically. Make an impression on the agent by exhibiting that you have read their authors. You've heard them speak at some forum. You should say that you have represented Neil Mukherjee and Salman Rushdie and X and Y. I think my book has certain similarities with X and Y. Hence, I think you should read my book. Like you have to personalize your pitch to your agent, and no amount of workshops and no advice can do that for you. You have to do your own research and write, but research and write to the right person. You will find all the information on Google University. There's no book for this. So that is how you identify a literary agent. And international literary agents are pretty overwhelmed. You know, the success rate is, I think they probably accept 1 out of 100 applications. So spread your net really wide. And I would also suggest being honest that if you are writing to 3 people at once, you can tell them after they've expressed interest, tell them that, listen, I'm also in touch with 2-3 others. So if you're interested, let me know by so-and-so period.
Yeah. So Anandita, the next question is from Richard. He's like, thank you for such detailed answers. It truly helped to understand the process better. My question is that while you were working on this book, did you ever get sidetracked by a new idea or a project? And were you so passionate about this story idea that you never felt like giving up at any point of time?
Richard, because I had limited time when I was working on this, I had a full-time job. I didn't have the luxury to get sidetracked. But the only residency I went for in 2019, because I was stuck and I felt, I managed to get leave for a month and I went there. Over there, I met 4 other writers, and one of the writers actually told me that I should get sidetracked. She said, are you here for a month and you're just working on your novel every day? That's not a good idea. Take a Monday to just explore, do free writing, just explore some completely new thought. So that is a general advice. I didn't follow it because by then in 2019, I really was kind of, 70% done, and I just wanted to be finished because I was very frustrated that I was working on it for 4 years. So I wasn't really sidetracked by other writing ideas. I had a lot of ideas, which I made a note of and thought short story ideas and other stuff. I made a note of, and I thought that I would visit them once I finish writing this. But I don't think there's a right or wrong in this. For many people, if they're working on something really heavy and emotional, maybe working on a second project that's very different in tone might help the first project as well. So I think you have to do what works for you. It didn't work. Working on 2 things didn't work for me because I had a job. That was my first thing. This was my second thing. So yeah.
Thank you. We have a next question from Jay. Hi, Anindita. Could you describe the difference of working with an Indian or local agent and an international agent? Was it crucial to have an agent for different markets?
Interesting question. So Jay, a lot of international agents won't let you have another agent. And since I had already signed on my Indian agent and I liked her so much, when I started my second round of search for an international agent, I had to limit my search to agents who would be okay with the fact that I already have a South Asia agent, because I didn't want to be that person who ditched my India agent when I hit it with an international agent. I would not have felt good as a person. And also I thought that my domestic agent had been very good for me. So I didn't want to leave her. So so not all international agents will let you have a local agent. If you are lucky and you start off with your search and find an international agent who also sells in India, which many of them do, you don't need a local agent. But now I feel that this dual agent model is increasingly becoming popular because of the timelines. Like you can get a local agent and get published here once the book does well or is well received or has like 10 good reviews. You reach out to an international agent. Even then, they know that they have a sellable product and then they sell it. So this double agent model works, but that's a very new concept. And traditionally, people have really just had one agent. So it really depends on, again, what kind your book is. Like I know Kanishka Gupta, for instance, in India, he used to first only do Indian books, but an acquaintance sold a thriller to him and he sold it, in fact, abroad to the UK before he even sold it here. So I think that agent landscape is even changing and some Indian agents are doing pretty well abroad. So it's good to have an honest conversation with the agent and ask them if they are comfortable in all markets. So you might find an Indian agent who tells you that, listen, I'm very confident of selling your book here, but I can't sell it abroad. So then you have an agreement with them that you will have a second agent and you start that search.
Thanks. That's been very helpful. Anil, to answer your question, actually, it depends on the literary agents and their requirements, and it's on their site. How many chapters should you be sending to them? It's something which they would specify on their website. So it's very difficult to comment on that.
Yeah, so most agents have a specific format in which you need to write to them. That said, it does help to have some kind of an introduction, because blind mails, they don't, they just receive so many mails, it doesn't go somewhere. You don't need an introduction from a very important person. You don't need an introduction from a Booker-winning author, but any route you can get to connect you by email to an agent, please use that route. If it's a English literature professor from university or an author that they've published or a friend in publishing that you know, any introduction that you get to an agent is important because apparently everybody gets an introduction. Like cold mails don't really work. So try to get an introduction.
So that brings us to the last question. Yeah, Anu. After the first round of discussion with David Gibbons, which didn't go well, how did you collaborate with him later?
David Godwin, his name is David Godwin. He's quite a legend. I think that time he wasn't confident of taking me on. He said I needed a female editor. I was honestly quite irritated. But after the book did well here, maybe he thought he could sell it. After it did well here and I started the process of writing to a new set of international agents, I did remember though that he had said, once you finish the book, write to me again, because he had made that decision based on the first 2 chapters. But I didn't want to send it to him because, you know, nobody likes being rejected twice. So I didn't, but my agent here and my editor, they were very keen. I went by their advice. They said that this is a very, very good fit for David Godwin. So don't have an ego, write to him. So I wrote to him saying that, you know, my editor thinks I should write to you and what do you think? And this time he read the book and he's also quite known for like responding if he likes your book within 24 hours. So I had sent him like one afternoon and by next afternoon, 2 o'clock, he called me saying he would like to represent me. So I'm glad I did. I think that is just the advice that I would like to give is that you don't need to have any ego. You don't know these agents, just write to everyone. Just do your research and write to the right people. But for instance, in the case of Godwin, I think the fact that here HarperCollins had pitched very well for it and made this press release, grand release, blah, blah. The book was still not out here when he took me on, but there was already some pre-buzz about the book and all of that. But the book was not published. It was still 3 months before it was going to be published. But I think it was enough, that gave him enough, I guess, confidence to go ahead with taking me on.
Thank you so much, Anindita. Your honesty and the detailed answers that you've taken time to share with us have actually been very informative. As you can see in some of the comments, people have been actually appreciating all the information. It's truly one of the best sessions from a writer talking so honestly. So they've really enjoyed this. Are there any other questions that you have for Anindita? If not, then we can end this session. Oh, yes, Chirag, please go ahead.
Hi, what's your zodiac sign?
Oh, I'm Taurus.
I'm a Taurus too.
Okay.
So,
very nice session. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I feel, you know, Namrata, to what you said, as first-time authors, for instance, there is such less information. There's just so much obscurity. No one even knows what advances are normal. So when I was offered my advance, which you signed many NDAs to like not reveal, I had no one to check with whether it was okay. Even agents don't always know. Right. I had one friend who was published by the same publisher who said that, listen, we need to talk about all of this so that we don't get fooled. Right. So now I feel there's a group and there's some kind of community where we discuss figures and, you know, earlier contracts in India would have this clause saying that the publisher has first right of refusal for your next book. And it's not a good clause because, you know, another publisher might offer you a much better deal. So now through conversation, I know that that clause is removed from many contracts and it was not there in my contract. So I feel it's really important as community to share the information that we have, because otherwise there just really isn't, this information is not available online, and it's in everyone's interest to keep it hidden. There are also writers who lie about the large advances they were paid, and then when you check with the publisher, you realize they were not paid that. So I think it can sometimes lead people down a wrong path, right? It can lead people to like quit their jobs or fight with their families and say, I'll become a writer, and then they are like penniless. So it's very important to kind of just be clear about the fact that if you're writing fiction in India, you're doing it for yourself. Till your second or third book, you're not going to make money for it to be sustainable. It is not a sustainable profession. But the best we can do is to write books that we are proud of and, that we feel are authentic to who we are, and change the lives or touch the lives of a few people in some kind of positive way. So we should not get fooled in the process, basically. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes, very beautifully said. And on that note, that brings us to the end of the session. Thank you so much, Anindita, for sparing your time. And thank you everyone for joining us. We shall see you next Sunday. We'll be having Arnav Sinha to be talking to us on translations and translated literature in India. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you, Anindita. Have a great weekend. Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks,
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.